As a teacher, have you ever had an unforgettable student? What was she like?
I've had a lot of unforgettable students, but one, rather obviously, comes to mind here on Quora, Habib. So let me tell you about the day I met this kid, and he was a kid back then, age 15, maybe? Anyway, I was sitting in my classroom, minding my business. The woman who taught next door to me popped into my classroom. She was my mentor and friend. "Hello, Rita. What can I do for you?" "Well," she said, "do you have room in your physics class third hour?" "Actually, I don't." "Why?" "Well, I've got this kid in physical science. I think they put him in there because they didn't know what to do with him, but he's bored to tears. You should take him as an independent study. I checked it out. If you're okay with that, I'll make it happen." "Sure, if he's that far ahead, send him over." Habib lasted just 12 weeks. No, he wasn't over his head in my physics class. He was bored to tears in my physics class. At the end of the semester, I transferred him to AP Physics. The teacher of that class told me I was insane, that no student could possibly miss the first half of AP Physics and still pass the course, much less the test. I told him he was about to be proven wrong. He was. So you can imagine my delight when Habib showed up on my AP Chemistry roster the following year. And you can imagine my self-doubt when he used a whole slew of words I was sure were English words, but which were far enough outside of my regular vocabulary. Read, I did not know these words, that I was looking them up after he left. And then one day he was working with another student on AP Chemistry, in French. What was he like? Helpful, attentive, limitlessly fascinated with literally every topic, and intuitive to the point of clairvoyance. To parody the old Chuck Norris meme, Habib Fanny doesn't read books, he just stares at them until the knowledge, fearful for its life, leaps into his brain. They say that the truly gifted find connections between things that everyone else thought were unrelated. That was a regular occurrence with Habib, and I found myself saying, I never thought of it that way, so frequently that I might as well have just had it printed on a sign to hold up. He was also the ultimate polymath and polyglot. He actually did better on the AP English test than the AP Chemistry test, despite having a truly remarkable, and humble, AP Chemistry teacher. Meanwhile, he was completely fluent in the intricacies of American politics, reveled in mathematics, and graduated at 16. Then he got a nursing degree, a medical degree, became a Quora superstar, wrote a book, and became a US citizen. But despite his almost comically impressive list of traits, my favorite is his unabashed sense of self. Habib is his own person. He always was. Unlike so many other young people who are desperate to conform, Habib was always utterly disinterested in that. He knew he was different and lived in that space with effortless aplomb. He didn't lord it over people, he was just comfortable. Today, he blogs about his socks and his massively overinflated sense of humility with that same relaxed disregard for the opinions of others. Habib truly is the Sultan of Sakistan. He's also my friend, but he was a truly unforgettable high school student. A couple years back I had a young girl in my 7th grade history class. Very quiet, well-behaved, and shy. A week or two into the school year, I did my annual reshuffling of the seating arrangement now that I knew who absolutely could not sit near each other anymore, and inevitably the good kids, like this young lady, end up as buffers and have to put up with the antics of their less mature classmates. I felt bad that this quiet kid had to sit by the loudmouth, so I made an effort to speak to her and apologize for her classmate. Her response was an awkward giggle, too shy to really respond to me. Over the coming weeks, I tried to get her to come out of her shell in class and the giggle response continued until she earned the nickname Giggles. Giggles did eventually give in and start talking to me, something she didn't do in any of her other classes. By the holidays, I was the favorite teacher, and I knew it not because Giggles told me, but because her mother thanked me for being so kind to her daughter. She shared her quirky side and worked hard for me in class. Mine was the only one she had straight A's in all year, and not because I treated her any differently. I became like a mentor to Giggles, especially helping her get along with the witch of a science teacher she had, processing family issues, and negotiating middle school drama. At some point in the year, the Giggles name stuck, and even her classmates knew her by that name too. The end of the year came, and on the last day she asked me if she could give me a hug. My rule, as a male teacher, is I will never initiate one, but won't turn one down either. I didn't teach Giggles in 8th grade, but still got visits in the hallway almost daily. One particularly bad day, I don't remember exactly why it was bad, just that I was extremely grumpy with my class as we were heading to lunch. I heard a high-pitched Mr. H from down the hall and saw Giggles heading my way. At the exact moment of my heightened frustration, there was one student in the school who reminded me that somebody cared about me, and the words came out, "I could just adopt you, Giggles." Now, Giggles has her own family, so that was out of the question. But the idea was planted. I went from curiosity, to denial, to interest, to taking action. Now, almost 2 years later, I am weeks away from starting my family, finally. I'm going to be bringing home a sibling pair of preteens from foster care, drastically changing my life and theirs. Unfortunately, Giggles went to high school before I finally decided this was going to be my life choice, and I never got to tell her about her role in the decision. But I will absolutely tell my children about the student who led me to becoming a dad. I have one right now. Writing this Annan in case she is on Quora, so I don't embarrass her. Smiley. She came to me when I was working as a math tutor. She was failing algebra and desperately needed help. It soon became clear that she was not just ignorant of basic math principles, but had some kind of cognitive issue with processing mathematical concepts. Over time I figured out that she had trouble with abstract visualization. She couldn't envision shapes or see how various processes fit together. She couldn't even look at two angles and see that one was larger than the other. It was the math version of a reading disability, and merely explaining material to her wasn't going to get her past it. I spent over a month just trying to get the basics across to her. Concepts like when you multiply a negative times a negative you get a positive just would not stick, and without those basics, how much algebra can you do? Honestly, there were moments I really despaired, and wondered whether it would even be possible to get her to the point where she could pass the course. And I know she was bereft of an hope, despairing. To her it was utterly confusing and totally overwhelming, and I know that deep inside she had no hope it would ever be otherwise. But she worked. Even when she didn't believe it would do any good, she worked, harder than I have ever seen anyone work in my life. No matter how depressed she was on a given day, or how confusing the work was, she always gave it her best. There were days the math went so badly, and she felt so overwhelmed, I sensed that inside she wanted to cry. Some days she was so exhausted from school she could barely add two numbers, but she never gave up. I have never seen anyone so determined, in my life. And when she passed algebra, got a B, actually, it was because of that quality in her. I can't think of any other student I've had who would fight what seemed like a losing battle for so long, without ever flagging. This year she took geometry. I was dreading it even more than she was, because by then I understood more about how her brain processed math, and the visualization skills required by geometry just weren't there. Geometry spoke to the very heart of her cognitive weakness, and she just passed her soul test, and it looks like she'll probably pass the course. I can't even describe to you what a monumental thing that is, and it was possible only because of her amazing attitude. She just never gives up, no matter how bad it gets. A girl like that can do anything she puts her mind to, in life. Totally inspiring. Several, but one comes to mind in particular, going Annan because he follows me on Quora. I'm going to call him Dmitry. I met Dmitry when he was in 7th grade when I was to be his teacher. Before the first day of school at the middle school where I teach, which starts in 7th grade, we have a fun hiking day where students get to interact with their teachers. Parents can come if they want, they usually do, and we get to be outside. Of course it's optional, but students are strongly encouraged to come. Dmitry came by himself. When we got to the top we do this exercise where everyone picks out two palm-sized rocks. They choose one they don't like very much and let it represent all their fears and angers, and then they throw that off the mountain. We encourage them to scream when they do this if they want to. It's often fun to just scream as loud as you can. And then with the other rock you let it represent what you love about yourself, or you let it represent someone you love. We often tell them that they can save it for someone they love. When Dmitry threw his first rock over the mountain, which is in a direction nobody is, so no passing hikers could be potentially hit with rocks, he let out the most gut-wrenching scream ever. He doubled over with it and screamed until he couldn't anymore. I remember thinking to myself, that is a child with demons. The school year started. I was Dmitri's English and history teacher. He was a great student. The kind of student nobody worries about. 4.0 GPA, top marks in all areas. He was very popular although he didn't have any real friendships, but he didn't have any enemies either. He had a great sense of humor and was just a very likable kid. He was also a good writer. His essays were always pretty good, although also very closed off. Like he was locking the reader out of the story, he never connected anything to himself. He seemed scared to show that level of emotion. The way he outlined and articulated essays was good beyond his years, but he never made the reader feel anything. Which isn't surprising, not that many 7th graders know how to make a reader laugh or cry. About halfway into the semester there was an assignment for the students to write about a time they struggled to say something. This could be having a hard time telling the truth, having trouble saying how they were feeling, or just any struggle with communication they have had. I see Dmitri's essay in his folder as he's sorting through some papers from his bag and go to grab it. He quickly grabs it before I can and says, "Oh, that's a rough draft." Then he hands me another version, which I accept. But before I go I ask if I can have the rough draft as well. I really like watching the way a student's writing changes between drafts and assure him I won't grade the rough version. He seems like he very much wants to say no, but he was a very passive kid and he agreed. I'm grading papers that night and first read his final version. Pretty much what I was expecting, a well-written, well-organized introspective essay regarding when you should tell the truth to preserve somebody's feelings and when honesty is more important. Its ideas were deep, but he did a weak job connecting it back to his own life. Then I read the rough draft. It was on a completely different topic and blew my mind. It wasn't organized or planned. I don't think Dmitri outlined it first and it seems like he wrote it without the intention of it being read. It seemed more like something he did for himself therapeutically. The essay was about his older brother who had died of a drug overdose when Dmitri was 9 and his brother was 15. This is not something I had known about. He talked about how difficult it became to talk to people after that. One quote that really stayed with me, taken directly from the essay, was at the funeral everyone felt the need to talk to me. They gave me their condolences and told me it would be okay even when it clearly wouldn't be. I wanted them to go away and shut up and just let me be alone with silence. After the funeral, after all the thoughts and prayers were out of the way, everyone faded into the background. They were so worried they'd say the wrong thing that they chose to say nothing at all. With a mother who had collapsed into herself, I was left alone with a dead older brother and I ended up resenting the silence I had searched for at the funeral. I looked for brother's name everywhere. In his room, on the trails we used to hike, in the medical examiner's toxicology report. All I found was a stranger who I felt I had no right to grieve. Dmitri went on to talk about how after his brother's death he had become obsessed with the police investigation into where his brother had gotten the drugs. Because, as Dmitri put it, he wanted someone to blame. He blamed himself for not knowing about his brother's use, and his brother for using, and he just wanted someone who wasn't him or his brother to blame. To quote another part of his essay, they never found the dealer and it took me over a year to realize it didn't matter. I wanted them to because then it wouldn't be brother's name's fault for doing drugs, or mine for not knowing he was doing them. It'd be all the dealer's fault for giving them to him. It was, without a doubt, the best student writing I'd ever read. It made me cry, in parts it even made me laugh. I talked to Dmitri about it. He broke down in the conversation and said he hadn't actually talked to anyone about his brother in over a year. We talked for a while. At the end of the semester I found a little box with a note from Dmitri. The note read, I wasn't sure what this was supposed to represent. There were no parts of myself I particularly liked and no one I felt comfortable declaring a love for, even if the declaration was a private one. Thank you for showing me the parts of myself it could be and for showing me what a healthy relationship is. You're the person I was meant to give this to. Inside the box was his rock from the start of year high. I've kept it for the past 3 years. It's the most thoughtful student gift I could have asked for. I've loved continuing to get to know Dmitri. He's in 10th grade now and with his intellect combined with one of hell of a work ethic and his determination to be the first in his family to graduate college, I'm quite certain he has a big future ahead of him.